Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beat the Heat. I think that's a very good slogan. That's how I felt for the last couple of days. So, Beat the Heat. I'm Professor Svenja Zaminski, and I have the privilege of being on the UK Climate Change Committee, both on the Adaptation and Mitigation Committee. So, my focus is really on bringing both strands together. And I have a lot of experience working on climate impacts and heat. We are increasingly seeing heat in the UK, which I think tells us something. It's by far not as bad as elsewhere in the world, but even here in the UK in cities, we're really starting to see the detrimental impact of heat. And just to kind of set a little bit the scene, I spoke yesterday to the medical grad student from India, and she was telling me that she works in a hospital. And by the time she's extracted blood to get it to the testing site, in that short period of time, the blood sample is already contaminated because it is too hot. So they're really kind of struggling with, that was just a very simple example, I think, of how we see issues with heat. Well, we will have some time to talk about this, but most importantly, learn from each other. And I'm particularly pleased that this event is happening today. We have some colleagues online. Don't relax too much. There will be some work part at the end. There's also a family photo involved, I was told. So consider yourselves all being part of the family. So we'll call you up on this stage. But I thought we need to get started with some serious kind of reminding us and maybe setting the scene a little bit. And well, we have a photo of someone who's not here, but who wished to be here, Rachel Kite, who would like to open this, but she can't be here unfortunately. But she has sent us Gerald Howe from the FCDO, who leads on climate resilience, and who will set the scene, and I think get us into the right spirit. So over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And Rachel really wanted to be here today and is sorry that she can't. So what I thought I would do is I would, if you'll allow me, give you the speech that she was going to give you, because I think it's important that you hear exactly the way she feels and wants to think about this. So, I mean, it's a great pleasure to be here. Cooling and the mitigation of extreme heat is often regarded as a hidden area in the fight against climate change, but it is utterly critical if we're to meet net zero and achieve resilience in a warming world. And we know that among multiple freak weather occurrences, extreme temperatures pose one, if not the biggest danger to human life. And we had one example, but there will be many others. We know that over 1 billion people are at high risk of a lack of access to crucial cooling solutions, putting many of the world's most vulnerable people at high risk for heat stress, adversely affecting human health, labour, productivity and economic development. And according to the Cool Coalition, cooling will be one of the top drivers of global electricity demand over the next 3 decades. By 2050, space cooling alone will consume as much electricity as China and India combined do today. So that's a vast amount of energy use. So this means we must adapt and keep our towns and cities cool, but not at any cost. As the temperatures rise in multiple parts of the world, international collaboration is a critical enabler for delivering impact. And here in Belém, we have to congratulate the Brazilian government, COP30 President's team and UNEP Cool Coalition for launching their Beat the Heat initiative just 4 days ago at COP. And it's fantastic that already over 60 cities have signed up to this, showing the leadership that cities bring to this agenda, and I thank all of them. For us in the UK, we're really pleased that one city that supported this initiative is Greater Manchester. And we've been delighted to work with GMCA to understand how best to adapt homes in this region. We're also really delighted that Liverpool was just announced as the first United Nations Accelerator City. We know we're going to have mayors from Manchester and Liverpool here, and I'm pleased you'll be able to hear from them and their representatives shortly. In this fight against heat, understanding the data and the evidence on how best to adapt to climate change is critical. So we're really pleased to announce as the UK, we're intending to launch a new programme of research called the Built Environment Adaptation Research Programme, BEAR if you like acronyms, with a budget of around £2.5 million. And the aim of that programme is to build the evidence base about how we can effectively adapt our buildings and built environment to climate change whilst delivering net zero. I don't know if anybody else has heard this term that's doing the rounds at the moment, but although it's an ugly word, adaptation is a way of trying to think about how you bring these two things together, but I will leave it there. Beat the Heat is another initiative as part of the Global Cooling Pledge. We'll continue to support the Global Cooling Pledge, and we thank the UNEP-led Cool Coalition for their leadership and the COP28 and 30 presidency teams, and particularly Adalberto from Brazil for their commitment to this cause. We're delighted the Cooling Pledge has now been signed by 72 countries, again showing momentum and scale and demand on this agenda. In the UK, we're supporting the African Centre Excellence in Sustainable Cooling, focused on the development of sustainable cooling solutions in Africa. And we're providing leadership of the Super Efficient Appliance Deployment Initiative with the IEA. And we are supporting the Ayrton Fund with a specific focus on clean energy research, development and demonstration in developing countries. A key pillar of this fund is the Sustainable Cooling for All Challenge, which aims to make low-carbon cooling technologies affordable and accessible globally. And that is a key challenge for us all ahead. That includes supporting net zero emission cooling hubs for fisheries in Indonesia and energy efficient cooling systems for extreme heat adaptation in Pakistan, directly addressing food security, livelihoods, and public health in climate vulnerable regions. Overall, this will demonstrate UK leadership and expertise in cutting global emissions through world-leading innovations and building resilience for all people everywhere. But we know that unilateral action is insufficient alone to deliver the transition and achieve the scale needed to make a difference. To meet our goals, we must harness the full range of all of our assets. As temperatures rise, we have a duty to keep our communities safe and comfortable. In a warming world, we must continue to strive for a clean solution to cooling. And you'll hear more about this from our colleagues in the session about how we can work together to safeguard the lives and livelihoods of billions of people for the better. I can assure you here that the UK is fully committed to play its whole part and looks forward to the modern, vibrant partnerships and impact that we can have ahead. Thank you very much indeed on behalf of Rachel.
Thank you very much for these introductory words, Gerard. I'm now very pleased that we have Hong Peng from UNEP, who's actually going to tell us more about the Global Cooling Pledge and set the scene. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say I lived in the UK for over 10 years. I would say UK is my second home country, and lovely to be back to the UK Pavilion. And more, I want to say is this is certainly one of the few pavilions have proper cooling. So you see, altogether make me feel really happy. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just follow what colleagues from FCDO, from our special envoy. I mean, I want to say thank you so much for the partnership with UNEP on this super important topic. We actually just finished another event in the Building and Cooling Pavilion with some colleagues there. We were discussing with 4 African country colleagues about how we work together to implement the cooling pledge, as colleagues just mentioned. Okay, let me start saying on the topic, we all know extreme heat is the clearest signal of climate crisis, especially felt in cities. extreme heat is already deadly, causing around 500,000 deaths per year, and it will get worse. UNEP's most recent emission gap report projects global warming of at least 2.3 to 2.5 degree, even with the full implementation of all the announced NDCs. Cities suffer the most from heat waves. By 2050, the number of urban poor exposed to dangerous heat could increase by 700%. Challenge of expanding affordable cooling for adaptation while cutting energy and carbon footprint for mitigation. So action at a local level is essential. So UNEP with partners knows how to get the job done at the local level. As colleagues just mentioned, the Global Cooling Pledge launched at COP28 commits governments to a roadmap of actions that could cut over 60% of cooling greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, while expanding access to cooling and heat resilience for billions through implementation. So we already have over 70 countries joined this Global Cooling Pledge. In addition to the pledge, UNEP also works to translate the pledge to practice, including at a local level. So with the support from Switzerland, from Denmark, Climate Works Foundation, the UNEP-led Cool Coalition is supporting cities and states in India to assess the heat risks, plan cooling solutions, design green urban environments, and more. So India is designing its $1.5 billion National Disaster Mitigation Fund to allocate finance for passive cooling. Another example is, as I just mentioned, the APEC we call, enabling pledge implementation of cooling facility, which provided a tailored technical assistance to cities, creating a scalable model for private finance to flow to local actors. APEC Deploy, we just discussed in another event, with general support from government of Italy, helps identify and implement transformative sustainable cooling technologies, generate evidence, inform policy through measurable results in 10 partner countries, including Brazil, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Ethiopia, Cambodia, and Vietnam. So it focuses on ports and health facilities. It also includes developing business models and technology development to meet the specific country cooling needs, such as centralized cooling, cold chain, and efficient renewable powered technologies. Sustainable cooling and cold chain solution program, again, get generous support from the UK government and the Rwanda government. We are working together to deliver the locally relevant services through specialized, we call centers of excellence, to accelerate the uptake of sustainable cooling and cold chain in the global south, like Rwanda, Kenya, next to Haryana in India. So for this program, we are very happy to show we already set up proper facilities in the country to deliver the cooling solution, including organizing massive scale of training of local stakeholders. So Beat the Heat implementation drive is the next step to advance passive nature-based and low energy solutions to extreme heat locally. So really to implement that, we already got 185 cities to join the Beat the Heat drive, along with 72 global cooling pledge signatories. Just released the UNEP cooling, Global Cooling Watch report sets out a sustainable cooling pathway, which details affordable, scalable, and local solutions. This path underpins the Beat the Heat implementation drive, could deliver 2/3 of global cooling pledge, 60% potential cooling emission reduction, again by 2050. The UNEP Light Cool Coalition will also provide institutional anchoring, visibility, reporting, and implementation mechanisms for Beat the Heat. For example, we will report back to the Cooling Ministerial every year. We support 100 cities from Global South to carry out heat assessments and identify cooling solutions. And we also support them to move from emergency response to long-term planning, integrating heat resilience into urban design, building codes, and public infrastructure. So we look forward to hearing from partners taking transformative action at city level and the linkage with Beat the Heat. So by following the sustainable cooling pathway, especially at a local level, delivering on the global cooling pledge, we can beat the heat together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hong Peng, for these remarks. Particularly the mitigation and adaptation link is so important, where I think we just have to be smarter and also harnessing nature in our quest to address heat. So thank you very much for this. I'm now very pleased to hand you over to someone who currently sits somewhere where it's actually very different to what we're experiencing here in Belém. We're now going to attempt, well, hopefully not just attempt, but manage a connection back to Manchester. And I think I said this in my introductory remark. It is quite telling when cities in the UK are starting to struggle with extreme heat. And when we realize that our infrastructure, our schools, our hospitals, you know, even sometimes our supply chains are not really equipped to deal with extreme heat. So I'm really pleased to welcome Mark Atherton now. He's the Director of Environment from the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and most importantly, the first UK signatory of Beat the Heat. So Mark, over to you, and tell us about, well, the current weather in Manchester, but more importantly, why Manchester have joined the Beat the Heat initiative.
And thank you for that welcome. In Manchester, we are going through some stormy weather at the moment, so it's quite pertinent that I'm here talking today about climate change and what we're doing in Greater Manchester to try and adapt to future climate change. Greater Manchester is a proud member of the Urban Transition Mission, so we're working with over 150 global cities to share our experiences and our ideas about how to mitigate for carbon emissions, but also adapt to climate change. And as part of our membership of the Urban Transition Mission, we've been working with the UK Department for Energy Security and Net Zero to analyse and address climate-related heat risks in Greater Manchester and across the UK. Traditionally, temperate climates like ours have been considered resilient to extreme heat. But in recent years, we have shown that no region is immune. Heat is now impacting everybody, including those of us in the UK, and the effects are increasing and accelerating. Greater Manchester itself is a major urban centre. You'll know probably as for our footballing abilities, but it's home to 3 million people, and it has significant economic, cultural and infrastructure assets. We're located in the northwest of England. It's a diverse geography. It has low-lying urban centres, which are quite heavily concreted, very hard infrastructure, but we are also surrounded by upland areas. In fact, on 4 sides almost, we're surrounded by hills. Now this creates a bowl for Greater Manchester to sit within, which creates some real climate challenges for us, both in terms of creating heat sink, but also we have flashy rivers. And so when it rains a lot, then our rivers rise relatively quickly. And another large challenge for us in terms of climate change is our increased flood risk. The region, as I said earlier, has a temperate climate normally with mean annual temperatures around 10 degrees C. So nothing like you're experiencing in Brazil. And rainfall varies somewhere between 800 millilitres and 1,000 millimetres in upland areas. But we do get quite strong winds, quite common, particularly this weekend, especially in the winter. The climate in Greater Manchester has already changed. and 5 of the warmest years on record have occurred since 2006. The most recent decade was on average about 1 degree warmer than the pre-1990 baseline. So our seasonal rainfall patterns have shifted. We've got drier summers and wetter winters. In July, Greater Manchester experienced quite an extreme heat wave, resulting in approximately 70 excess deaths and creating quite a significant disruption, particularly for our health services. So including things like cancelling hospital operations that couldn't occur during the heat. A couple of years before that, the heat wave in 2018 saw wildfires on some of our surrounding moorland, Saddleworth Moor and Winter Hill, which caused significant air quality problems for people living nearby, and also shut nearby roads, and people had to lock themselves indoors to prevent from being overcome by fumes. It also had quite significant impact on our biodiversity. Climate projections in Greater Manchester indicate that by the 2050s, our annual average temperature could rise to between 1.2 and 1.8 degrees C, with maximum summer temperatures increasing up to about 2.4 degrees C under high emission scenarios. Now, that is a huge, significant increase for us. And it means the number of hot days could double, in fact. Number of heat waves may become 2 or 3 times more frequent than we currently have by the 2080s. So it's not just my generation or my children's generation, it's their children who will suffer from some of the more adverse temperatures that we're going to see between now and the end of the century. What are we doing about it? Well, in Greater Manchester, we completed a full climate change risk assessment last year. It identified 63 climate risks or opportunities, and this 14 of them are currently assessed as high magnitude risks. This rises to 27 by the mid-century. A lot of these are around high temperatures and the impact on infrastructure failures, increased flooding, decreased air quality, and these are some of the more significant and severe impacts in Greater Manchester, which just highlights the urgent need for adaptation and mitigation in our city region. We know that climate risk and climate change doesn't affect everybody equally. It affects our more vulnerable groups, particularly old adults, children, and people with pre-existing health conditions most severely, and those living in the most poor quality housing and outdoor workers will suffer more from heat-related stress in particular. And we have some high levels of deprivation in Greater Manchester. About 15% of our population is counted as energy poor. And we are I think we are the 4th most vulnerable in index of multiple deprivation in the UK. So what systems are we seeing and what vulnerabilities are we experiencing? Largely it's around expanding heat-related risks to our population, and what we're trying to do is increase the alert system so that we're making it easier for our most at-risk groups to take shelter. We're improving access to cooling centres in our neighbourhoods and creating more shade and public spaces for people to cool. We're enhancing our healthcare and social care systems to help cope better within heat waves. And we're starting to think about how we retrofit our buildings, not just to keep them warm in the winter, which is one of our prime concerns, but also how do we make them passively cooled in the summer months. We're also expanding our green infrastructure, and this has been one of the key pieces of work we've done with Department for Energy and Climate Change, looking at particularly how our water resources can be mitigated to reduce the risk of flooding and to reduce the heat island effect. We're upgrading our transport and energy systems to become more resilient to extreme temperatures. The climate change risk assessment has basically shown us that we're not immune, and we need to start adapting now to make sure that we're prepared for the next 50 years to become a more resilient and climate-ready city region. I think heat impact is no longer a distant threat for us. Even in temperate areas like Greater Manchester, we need to start to adapt now because it takes that time to change our infrastructure. But by combining our robust analysis and targeted interventions, we think we can do this. We want to act decisively, we want to act together with other cities, and by being part of the Beat the Heat initiative, We're hoping to share our experiences with others and learn from others about how we can support our citizens together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. I hope you can actually see us here. We can clearly see you. We come now to a very interesting part in the program called the family photo. So I would invite actually everyone to join the stage if you want to. There's going to be a photo, I think, with our online participants. So please join me here for a quick photo, and then we'll continue with our panel discussion. Okay, we're now coming to the part where we're going to talk about solutions, I hope. And I would like to welcome our panelists to the stage. And we have one panelist online. So we'll do this, well, the good old hybrid way, to introduce themselves and maybe give us a little bit of flavor of what their heat-related work entails, just very briefly. And I think, Katja, we start with you. So over to you, Katja Eisbrenner, director from Guidehouse.
Hello, it works? Yes, my name is Katja Eisbrenner. I'm a director at Guidehouse. We are an international consultancy. I'm based in our German office. And we're working on different aspects of heat and also built environment. And today I have the pleasure to talk about our CoolUp program. CoolUp is supporting sustainable cooling solutions in the MENA region. We are also a member of the Cool Coalition, and that's very practical because we are actually working on the ground and we are really trying to provide feedback from the experience we have in our partner countries, always back to the global level. What we see in our partner countries, they are in MENA region, so Turkey, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and we see that they have generally already high ambient temperature. So it's something that they're theoretically used to. But these extreme heat events are really impacting. They're increasing in frequency and they're also increasing in the intensity. And it also increases the electricity demand at the same time. And that causes other problems, what we heard before, and risking also blackouts that can really then have the devastating impact. What we've seen is that, of course, in CoolUp we're looking at cooling solutions that are considering passive cooling solutions, but also, of course, we need to start looking at greening the cities first, so trying to do, and we will hear a little bit more about that later, I think also to see that we decrease the ambient temperature in the cities by greening facades, but also with trees. That's like the first starting point. Then the second, when we look at buildings, we need to look at the passive measures first. And that includes ventilation, that includes shading, and it also includes traditional ways of building houses. Because in this region, everybody knows, or in the past, it was known how to build the houses, but it wasn't very modern. And a lot of people looked at the West and then added air conditioning as the first solution. So we also need to look what we can retrieve from this existing knowledge. At CoolUp, we are considering all of the different options, but I want to give an example of the air conditioning topic. In Egypt, at the moment, only 27% of the floor areas in residential building is air conditioned. That means there is a huge increase that we're expecting to come. What that means in electricity is that by 2030 in our projections, already double amount of electricity for air conditioning is expected, and by 2050 already a quadrupling. So we really need to look at the solutions, and if air conditioning at the last resort is needed, we need to do it more energy efficient, but we also need to look at the refrigerants that are used. And this is actually the sister protocol, the Montreal Protocol, that is looking into that. And with the Kigali Amendment, that's all connected here. There are technologies available, and we are testing them in the markets to show that they actually can be trusted. Because often, even if something is working in India or in China, it doesn't mean that people trust that it will work in Egypt, and it may actually not, but that is why we need to do this monitoring of these specific elements.
Okay, thank you very much. Very powerful examples. I would like to turn to Georgia, who is also online. Georgia Rambelli from the Through the Urban Transition Mission initiative. I believe you've explored the needs of different cities. So can you tell us a little bit more about your work and what you actually see in these different cities involved, and what their concerns are about heat and what their challenges are?
Thank you very much for the question and for having me. Indeed, I have the pleasure to be the director of the Urban Transition Mission. We are bringing together a cohort of 118 cities in 48 countries across the world and helping them, supporting them in their trajectory to become net zero, resilient, and inclusive. We have the pleasure to be supported by a number of partners, our Global Innovation Alliance, which includes national governments, including the UK, but also private sector partners and international organizations. And the first step that we undertake when we welcome one of the cities into our mission is to really try to assess together with them what are the key priorities and the pain points they are facing in their trajectory. About 20 out of the 118 that we have got to know in the past couple of years have flagged that cooling for them is one of the key priorities we would like to really engage and work together with us. In reality, we quickly understood that whilst 20 said that this was a key priority, a number of other cities were just not calling that priority cooling. They were talking about deployment of nature-based solution, strengthening of the resilience of their infrastructure, be those transport or energy infrastructure. They were talking about disaster risk reduction planning or energy efficiency in buildings, or even talking about strategies to tackle energy poverty or increasing the sustainable and renewable energy deployment locally. So it was really clear for us from the very beginning that when we were talking about cooling, all of these different things need to be addressed as different pieces of the puzzle that come together to try to address this very complex issue that has to be curated with answers that are helpful at the local level. So in terms of the needs, I think I would like to single out three, let's say, categories in particular. The first one is the support that our cities and community need in planning and developing a strategy for cooling their city and for tackling extreme heat locally. Currently, in most places, holistic policies on sustainable cooling are still lacking, or they do not exist. And because of that, because of this lack of regulatory framework, often the measures are not as impactful as they could be on the ground. This idea of having supportive all need to strengthen multi-level partnership and collaborations with the national level.
Okay, thank you very much, Georgia. We got, I would say, 99% of it, and then the screen went blank. So we'll come back to you in a minute. I would like to now welcome Hubert, who is the lead negotiator from the Ghana Energy Commission. And I understand you work on mitigation and energy transition. But I think we've talked a lot about cities, but there's clearly also a role for central government. So can you maybe tell us a little bit more about the work that's going on in Ghana in this context?
Right. So thank you very much, and I would like to extend my appreciation to the UK government for this invitation. My name is Hubert Zan. I work with the Ghana Energy Commission. I'm the focal point for the Global Cooling Pledge, and now also doubling as the lead negotiator for mitigation and energy transition. Now, I would like to speak from the policy point of view, what government is doing. And in the case of Ghana, we have what we call the National Cooling Action Plan. So we have made sure that this whole direction about cooling is in place. Now, when you hear beat the heat, then you seem to be excited about the rhyming. What are you beating? Of course, we know that extreme heat can kill. And so anything that will go against killing is so much welcome. And that is why the more reason why we are making sure that policies are in place, making sure that the National Cooling Action Plan has some indicators, has some values for us to look out for. In addition to that, she rightly mentioned about the Montreal Protocol, looking at cooling that also contains refrigerants. Now, in sub-Saharan Africa, we have had issues about dumping. And we talk about dumping in the case of new appliances which are inefficient and also containing obsolete refrigerants. Now, this is where most of these products find the end of life. You know, they find their way to Africa because there are no minimum energy performance standards. And so one of the initiatives we have taken is to set minimum energy performance standards for cooling, but also make sure that it is in line with the global technologies, meaning that we have moved away from just the traditional fixed speed to looking at seasonal calculations, where temperature bands have been changed to make sure that they are actually affecting, you know, the citizens and making sure that they are paying low for their electricity bills. That is very critical to the Ghanaian populace and Africa. In addition to that, we are also looking at institutional collaboration. How does the Environmental Protection Agency, who are working with the Montreal Protocol, play a good role with the environmental team and the climate team, as well as the energy team? Because these cooling devices have both direct and indirect emissions. And you can look at all of this also from electricity generation and the bills. So institutional collaboration is key, and we have at the top of the ladder made sure that institutions are working together so that the implementation of these policies can come to being. We've also looked at energy efficiency in buildings, and that is also very critical. And through the Ministry of Works and Housing, a roadmap has been prepared to look at climate resilience in terms of buildings as well, where passive and active cooling are taken into consideration, and also making sure that practitioners, architects, planners are able to incorporate passive cooling in also designing of, you know, cities and all of that. So these are my initial comments. And looking at the policy aspects, it is good to have the documentation in place, but it's also another thing enforcing them. And so I would like to emphasize that it is easy to come up with policies, but you need to have institutional leaders, those champions, to make sure that enforcement of the policies are right. And that is what Ghana is hoping to do. Walk the talk and enforce the policies that we are implementing.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's also one of the recommendations from the Committee on Climate Change to the UK government. Policy and plans is one thing, delivery and implementation is another. And that's where we really need to see urgent action. I really agree. I told the audience that you need to do some work in a minute, so get ready for that. I just would like briefly to come back to the panelists and just ask you, this is a learning environment. So what is your one key learning that you want people to take away in the context of your work? Try and keep it short, because we want people to actually start doing some work. And Andre is going to talk us through that in a minute. But over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the one thing is the learning is you need to combine the policy, the technology, and the finance thinking all together. It cannot work alone. You need to really embed it, and then also from the national level all the way to the city level. And we have done that, and I will take a minute maybe. We have brought at London Climate Action Week different practitioners from all the different areas together and have started a white paper that will be launched after COP, so you're invited to read it, really to look at joining the dots and heat-proofing the future, a cross-sector blueprint for resilient infrastructure. That is what we have called, very ambitious, but I invite you to participate in this exchange. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I'm sure people can come and find the QR code and come and find you. Okay, Georgia, I hope you're back. You can hear us again. So what is your key learning takeaway for us?
Oh, thank you very much. And yes, I can hear you well. I think from my perspective, I would like to say there are a lot of technologies and a lot of solutions that are already available and need to reach at scale. One of the key challenges that we see our cities facing is actually financing solutions and measures that relate to sustainable cooling. So what I would like to share is the need to explore new business models and new ways to finance and de-risk investment in particular in the infrastructure that are needed to make our cities more cool and really to beat the heat. So looking into how to use the potential capital in particular, bring together private funding, de-risking investment and guaranteeing more secure and safe solutions for our cities. I think that's the main message that I want to share with you today.
Okay, well, thank you very much, because we're talking about people, we're talking also about employees, and businesses have a really key interest in this. What is your key learning, Hubert?
Yeah, so my key learning will be making sure that people are not vulnerable. And so there needs to be the issue about affordability. We have what we call the price myth, affordability, which is the cost of these initial cooling devices seem to be very expensive for efficient products. However, we need to look at issues about getting these things and making them affordable by introducing incentives. I believe that in Africa, for example, once we are able to harmonize our minimum performance standards, we can get economics of scales, and that can also reduce the price. We can also look at bulk procurement and make sure that the incentives are in place to make sure that these appliances are available. And so cooling is not luxury. We must make sure that whatever we have to do, financial incentives are in place to help people acquire them. Thank you very much.
Okay, very powerful reminder about the inequality that is often related to cooling. So thank you to our three panelists. And I would like now to welcome Andre, who's been waiting very patiently online and who's going to make you work. I think we have some cards in the room that will be shared. I'm particularly pleased because you're going to be using one of the methodologies that the Committee on Climate Change has been using by assessing adaptation outcomes. So over to you, Andre, and tell us what we need to do and how we can help to inform your next steps.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sonia. I'm Andre Bradley from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero here in the UK. I'm joined by my colleague Graham, who is in the room and will be helping out with this session. Now, we've heard from our speakers so far about the importance of international action in this space and the value of learning from each other, and the importance as well of transformative action at a local level, I think was something that Hong Peng mentioned. And really with our activity here this afternoon, this is really going to be about learning from each other despite our different contexts in tackling this common challenge. And I think somebody with the clicker in the room might have to click to move on with the slides briefly. But essentially, extreme heat will be posing an ever-increasing threat to health, well-being, and productivity and livelihoods in cities across the world. And here in the UK, obviously, the Climate Change Committee has flagged the risk from extreme heat as one of our priority risks here in the UK. And there's an important recognition here in sort of this international setting that while we may have many different economic, social, infrastructure, local climate contexts, we do have this common challenge that we're tackling. There's actually a lot we can learn from each other despite those contextual differences. If we move to the next slide, Sonia, you'll be pleased to see us using the Climate Change Committee's adaptation assessment framework, the monitoring maps, as a bit of a tool to help us think about this and a tool to help us share our learnings. So here in the UK, the Climate Change Committee uses this monitoring map as part of its adaptation assessment framework. And there's a couple of key things uh, in these monitoring maps that help break down the problem, right? So setting out a clear goal, um, setting out an understanding of required outcomes to achieve that goal, and then breaking it out in terms of identifying enablers. These might be things such as they might be available financing initiatives, it may be research or guidance that's available, or general education on the topic, and separating that from policies, so distinct initiatives, policies, regulations um, that are actually in place either at a local level or sort of a sort of central government level that are looking to impact on this and are looking to deliver that change. And finally, one of the really important things, particularly in this setting today, is the contextual factors. So an understanding of the vulnerability to this risk. So not only who is vulnerable and why, um, but also understanding sort of our wider context within the city and how that impacts on our exposure to extreme heat. And I think Katya said something about this in the panel, which was really important. It's about the join up between the technology, the policy, the finance. And this is something that this monitoring map framework really emphasizes, which is that you need to have a good understanding across the piece of all these factors, not just the policy, not just the finance. You need to understand it all together to really provide a full picture of progress towards building climate resilience and identifying sort of the key gaps to reaching that adaptation goal. And so our activity this afternoon, if we move on to the next slide, and for those of you online, there'll be on the next slide, there'll be a QR tag to help with this. But for those in the room, you should have a card now, which is based on the Climate Change Committee's monitoring map approach. And we'll be using it to share a little bit of our own city or local experience on beating the heat. How is our city, how is our local area beating the heat? And the prompts on the card will help you through this, but it's really helpful to think about what's the high level extreme heat prevention reduction goal in your city, and I guess what outcomes are there are there framed in terms of delivering on that. So it might be perhaps there's a particular focus on protecting vulnerable people, as Mark was mentioning in Manchester earlier, or perhaps there's a focus on continuing public service delivery, making sure that continues and keeps things turning even in the heat wave. Um, then we'll move through and think a little bit about enablers. So what enablers are at play in your local area? Maybe there are finance initiatives. Maybe there's really good education or guidance in place. Perhaps there's a good health or sort of emergency warning response in place. And then we move on to the policy aspect, and this is sort of either a local or central government, the 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 measures, the initiatives, the regulations, the policies that are in place to try and address this challenge. And obviously, it would be really valuable to capture a little bit about what it is that makes your city or your local area vulnerable to extreme heat and why. So using those boxes at the bottom of the template. And if you'd like to share your name, obviously please do note your city on this template. And if you'd like to be in touch with us, do also feel free to add your name and a contact email address, and we'd love to follow up. But that's your task for this afternoon. And I believe we have the next 7 or 8 minutes. I'm not keeping the time at this end, so hopefully somebody in the room will help with this. We'll have the next couple of minutes to actually fill this out and capture a little bit of the story of how your local area, how your city is beating the heat. So I'll give you all a chance. If you're online, if we move to the next slide, there's a QR tag for you to download the template as well, and you can follow along with us through this activity. Um, so I think there's a small lag to the room, so I'll just wait to check we're on the right slide here. Um, there we go. Yeah, perfect. So if you use the QR tag on the left hand of the screen to get the template, and then if you're joining us online, you're welcome to upload your completed monitoring map for your city using the QR tag on the right-hand side of the screen. If you're in the room and filling this out on paper, Graham is in the room and I believe will be collecting these up at the end. And we'll have a minute or two to share an example or two from the session.
So just in the room here, we've given you out these, and just think about what your goal is. So your goal could be to protect the most vulnerable. Your goal could be to ensure that food systems remain secure. It's what you think is important for your city. So yeah, so that's your goal. And then once you've got your goal, the potential outcomes needed to deliver your goal. What would be needed? So if it was protect the most vulnerable, how would you make sure that cooling could be achieved for the most vulnerable? What would be the outcome there? And then the enablers to make that happen. So it could be cool spaces, or it could be green and blue spaces, could be education. And then if that was to be found its way into policy, what the policy would be. Okay, so there's no wrong answer here, okay? Just write down what you're thinking and feeling, okay? And we'll capture it and it will be really useful for us. I can see lots of people writing stuff, so that's great. Thank you. I know it's Saturday, late in the afternoon.
Yeah, I think a very important point. It's not a test. Yeah, it's very much a chance to learn from each other. So as Graham says, no wrong answers. We're very keen to learn from you and your experience.
There's some really good ones coming here. I'm just gonna. It's not a test, but it is. It's some really good ones from Lyon in France, and you know, the policies that suggested are heat action plans, climate adaptation plans, long-term nature-based solutions. These are really good ideas here, and thanks so much for sharing these. And I'm going to chat to a colleague from Somalia, okay? And I'm actually going to ask him if he would like to talk on the microphone.
Thank you very much. We need to promote water catchment to plant more trees. So we also promote policies and procedures to eliminate trees cutting. So that's why we are going to eliminate heats in the cities. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much. There's some really good answers there. So water conservation and trees is critical in Somalia. So that's a really good story. Anybody else would like to share anything at all? Thank you. Anybody else would like to share? Would you like to share, Katia?
Also happy to share. I mean, I'm from Germany, so heat is not the extreme thing, but the cities offered now an online map where every citizen can add their cool spaces, so that when you're in a city and it's burning hot, you know where to go, and that can include cemeteries or other elements. It's involve everybody.
Thanks very much, and I'm just going to go over to here, and we spoke briefly at the beginning, and I don't know if you'd like to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're doing. And yeah.
Hello, I'm Debbie Sarignan. I'm from the United States, New Mexico. And in our city, we are doing a lot of what you've already said. I just want to add one that We have a software called Brain, and it looks out through the city and sees where there's any kind of leaks or any kind of renewable energy, any kind of energy being used in excess, and it tracks that so the city can take care of it. We also are looking at, around our state, we're using satellites to look at water pipes to see if there's any leaks, because we had one city losing millions of dollars, and we found a leak and they fixed it, and now this city is doing well. But we're trying to use technology. We're a big technology state, and that's what we're using around our state, besides everything else you said. Thank you.
There's some really great stories that we're being shared here. So I don't know, Andre, if you want to, if there's anything else you want to, if there's anything online you can see.
Briefly, we've had obviously not as many submissions online, but we've had a submission from colleagues nearby down here in London on some of the things London is doing, and it's very interesting to hear actually that there's a lot of similarity to some of the things that those in the room are talking about in terms of the importance of increasing vegetation and managing heat risk through planning. Something quite interesting is also providing guidance for boroughs and residents, so whether that's on the climate risk map, a bit like Katja mentioned, but also guidance for schools and education facilities on adaptation, which is very interesting.
Well, thank you everyone for your hard work, and thank you again to our panelists and to Andre for talking us through this. It's been a real interesting exercise. I think the learning element is really important here. And I think we shouldn't forget, there are some really practical, low-hanging fruits in this space that can get us a long way. A lot of education, awareness raising. In the UK, we're talking about changing the exam schedule, that kids will no longer have their major exams in the summer, because that's kind of when you're least productive because it's very hot. I mean, some simple things, but there are also bigger issues. And I'm thinking of infrastructure challenges. I'm thinking about, the pressure on our grid as we transition to renewables. And, these are big challenges that we really need to start tackling now. So we need small scale and big stuff. And I think we can learn a lot from each other. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest and stay cool. My pledge is that we will have air condition that is quiet. That would be something, wouldn't it? Anyway, okay, thank you all.